A very good morning to all the participants of the FDP and my warm wishes to the speaker of today's session, Sri Ramesh Garu. And now I would like to invite Ramesh Garu to please take over the session.
Yeah, good morning to all. What are the basic basic fluid dynamics problems? Any other problem that you look at the complexity of and the governing equation got problem depends on the complexity of the problem that you are looking at. So, for example, if you are looking at multi-phase flows, you have to add additional equations that are pertaining to those governing equations and all. So it becomes more complicated when compared to what the existing equations are. But the thing is, currently the existing equations are itself complex enough. So let's look at why they are complex enough in a simple manner, and what are the basic numerical methods that we have to actually solve these equations. See, I can't explain you all the methods and the complete detailed method of solving these governing equations in 1 hour. But the whole methodology and the idea on which these basic methods have been developed are being shown here. That's it. Okay, so don't think that this is the final form of the numerical methods that is being used in any other software, or whether you can write your own code when if you are planning to. So let's look at what are the existing methods, what are the different types of methods, and then we'll see 1 or 2 equations, how to discretize them, and how do we solve them. So I'm sharing my screen. Okay. So hopefully people are able to see the screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So broadly, we have 4 different methods. The first one is finite difference method. The second one is finite volume method. The third one is finite element method. And the fourth, we can say that it's a spectral method. So of course, finite element method comes under the subset of spectral methods. And then we have fifth one. We have discontinuous Galerkin method, or we basically call DG. This is FDM, FVM, sorry, FEM, spectral methods, and DG. So these are the most famous methods that people use in solving all the partial differential equations or differential equations, whatever it is. So basic idea is you consider a domain. Let us consider a small domain. This is a domain of interest, and if this domain is discretized into number of points, so these are the basic number of points that you're looking at. And if you are solving the partial PDE at a given point, so then we directly take finite difference method. if you use integral approach, as I showed yesterday, you use finite volume method, and if you actually optimize, you construct a Galerkian and solve the Galerkian on that, you use finite element method. So that is actually out of it. So most of the finite fluid mechanics problems are solved using FEM and FDM. Currently, the trend is people are using DG, discontinuous Galerkin method, which is to solve fluid dynamics problems. So I'm not going to into details of DG. I'm not sure. I had once attended a course by one of the famous persons in DG, Professor Chi Wang Shu, in it's TAF or Bangalore. So I understand the basic details of it, but I haven't implemented as it is. I haven't written a code or implemented and worked on that, so I can't give the details. But finite difference method and finite volume method, in and out, I worked on it. So I'm very comfortable with in discussing these two things. Otherwise, people can opt this DG. DG is much more stable, and it's gaining its importance in fluid dynamics problems. There are many recent research papers that have come out. So let us look at finite difference method. So finite difference method. The basis for this is Taylor series. This method is developed based on Taylor series, basically. So everybody knows Taylor series. If you have f of x and you are looking at its update, or if you want to look at the new function value at some neighborhood of x, then we can write this as f of x plus or minus delta x f prime of x plus or minus del square by 2 factorial dou square f by dou x square and on and on and on. So it's an infinite series. So whatever, and first thing that let us look at a simple equation. So I'll take the wave equation, a linear wave equation, and let us look at how do you apply this finite difference method into this. So I have, this is my dou u by dou t plus a dou u by dou x, a equal to 0. This is a linear convection equation or a wave equation. So the basic characteristics of this equation is, so if you have u is the solution of this equation, u is a function of x comma t, and the basic characteristic of the equation is, if you have an initial profile given, so suppose u of x comma 0 is defined as some wave on these things, and this wave will just propagate. This wave will propagate as it is in space and time. So this is u of x comma z. So u of x comma t will be some at some position in the domain. You will see that the wave has moved forward. So that's a basic idea of that's the basic nature of this equation. It just convects the profile given, whatever the profile at you give at t is equal to 0. This equation just convects with the speed a. So we would like to understand how do I discretize this equation and then solve. This is the simplest of all the equations that you can solve. If you can get a methodology that can exactly represent this equation, then you may if you can encounter and figure out what are the difficulties that you are facing in this equation, then those difficulties would actually scale up when you are solving actually the Navier-Stokes equations. So if you can minimize the difficulties here, you can also minimize the difficulties when you are solving the Navier-Stokes equations. That's the whole idea. So when you are trying to devise any new method, you actually solve first for wave equation, and you see whether if the wave equation is getting solved exactly, and what are the difficulties, what are the actual anomalies that you can see in this method, you can find in this equation itself. Now let us look at this equation. So in this equation you have a time derivative term, and you have a spatial derivative term. So you need to approximate these two things. So how do you approximate this? So the basic idea, you are looking at the first derivative. So in Taylor series, I have my first derivative over here. So if I rewrite my Taylor series in terms of my first derivative, if I have to rewrite my Taylor series in terms of my first derivative, so I have f prime of x can be written as f of x plus delta x minus f of x by delta x, and all other terms you have del x by 2 factorial, dou square f by dou x square, and all other higher order terms. So you see that my first derivative can be approximated with this, but and and you can neglect, this is the error when you are approximating the first derivative with the values of the functions known at two different points, and during this process it is creating an error of this sort, and this error is proportional to delta x. So now you see that if my delta x is basically distance between 2 points, if you say that this is my delta x, and here my error is proportional to delta x. So if the distance between the 2 points are small, is large, my error is large. So, and this is one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it, you have f of x is f of x minus delta x by delta x, and you have delta x by 2 factorial, dou square f by dou x square plus higher order terms. So this is basically forward difference. This is backward difference. And if I want to reduce my error in this approximation, I would like to look at what happens if I take the difference between these two things, or use a central difference. So if as I say that f of x plus delta x is f of x plus delta x by delta x dou f by dou x plus delta x square by 2 factorial, dou square f by dou x square plus all other higher order terms, and you have f of x minus delta x as f of x minus delta x dou f prime of x plus delta x square by 2 factorial, dou square f by dou x square, and all other higher order terms. So if I subtract one from the other, you say f of x plus delta x minus f of x minus delta x, you get 2 delta x dou f by dou x minus, then you get plus 2 delta x cube by 2 factorial, dou cube f by dou x cube. And further higher order terms. So my dou f by dou x, if I take my approximation here, it takes my approximation here, I get f of x plus delta x minus f of x minus delta x by 2 delta x minus delta x square by 2 factorial, 3 factorial into dou cube f by dou x cube. That means by taking the central difference, I'm getting an error which is proportional to delta x square. So my error is getting reduced. So if you look at pictorially what's happening here, so I take 3 points. Say this is x, this is x plus delta x, and x minus delta x. Similarly, you can look at the same thing in time. So you are at x plus delta x in x minus delta x, and this is at t, and this is at t plus delta t in time. You are looking at in time. So you are approximating the first derivative. If you actually are looking at so if you take these 2 points to take my spatial derivative, that becomes backward difference. If you take these 2 points, that becomes forward difference. And if you take say these 3 points, that becomes central difference. So this is basically called the stencil. This is basically called the stencil that you look. Stencil in the grid, in space. Similarly, you can also take in time. In the time derivative, you can take these 2 points. These 2 are not the same points. They are varying in time. So one is at t and the other is in t plus 20. So you can take these 2 points. So my final stencil, if I am using a central difference scheme, and forward, if you are looking at forward in space, forward in time and central in space. So my stencil looks like this. So this is my stencil. So that's the region I'm actually covering. So in the grid. So we use this stencil to the wave equation and see what happens. So when you apply the same stencil to wave equation, you see that I have dou u by dou t. Before going this, I'll just rename the stencil as I have spatial grid points at I, say I plus 1 and say I minus 1, and this is at t, and similarly I have at t plus delta t. I have I plus 1 and I minus 1. So instead of t and t delta t, I'll use qi and qi plus 1. Q and q plus 1. Q representing my time. Q representing time basically. So this can be approximated. This can be approximated as ui at q plus 1 minus ui at q by delta t. This is my approximation for the time derivative. So similarly, I have dou u by dou x, which can be approximated as ui at q minus ui minus 1 at q by delta t. This I am taking backward difference. This is also, you are looking at qi plus 1 minus qi. So you are looking at backward in time. So backward difference in time. And this is backward. And if you approximate this with ui plus 1 q minus ui q by, delta x, this is forward difference. And the same thing, you have ui plus 1 q minus ui minus 1 q by 2 delta x. So this is the terminology that you get. So substitute back all these things in your equation. You have ui at q plus 1 minus ui at q by delta t plus a times, you take whatever the difference you take. So let me take the central difference and let us look at this. So you have ui plus 1 q minus ui minus 1 q by 2 delta x equal to 0. So if you look at this, these terms, this term, and this term, they are at time level q. That is, they are the known quantities. And if you look at this one, this is at time level q plus 1. So this is unknown quantity. So we'll try to express the unknown quantities in terms of known quantities. So when you write this in terms of unknown quantities, you have uiq plus 1 is equal to uiq minus a delta t by 2 delta x times ui plus 1 q minus ui minus 1 q. So the final expression for that wave equation would be like this. So you solve this equation at every grid point, right from the beginning.
Sir, excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, sorry for the interruption, sir. The last lines were not so visible, sir. If you use the upper space of the page, it will be a little clear, sir. The last equation is not visible, sir. Actually.
Can you see now?
Yes. We were able to see up to the equation. The last equation is not yet visible. Last one, sir. The one that you have written just now.
It's not visible.
Yes, sir. Because of the screen, sir. Your screen might be little bigger one, sir, than ours. So
okay.
Please utilize the upper side space, sir, so that it will be easier for us.
Okay. Just let me see my screen to understand where I am looking. Can you see this?
Yes, sir. Now it's okay, sir.
Okay, fine. So I'm trying to mirror my screen now and see what. Okay, so now you can see that the final expression is something like this. You have what is called the how do I, yeah. You have the final unknown quantity. This is the final unknown quantity in terms of known quantities. So if you have to write this, if you have to look at this on the grid, you can see like this. So what I am looking at is I have, this is at ui q plus 1, and you're looking at, this is at q plus 1th time step. This is at time step q. The value at this point is getting updated by taking the value from here and value from here. So the information is propagating from both the directions in the case of central difference scheme. Whereas if you use forward difference scheme, if you use backward difference scheme, the information propagates from these 2 points. This is for backward difference, and this is for central difference. And if you want to look at what happens to the forward difference, the information propagates something like this. So as the wave is propagating, you can see that the information is also propagating in on the grid. So we would like to understand now. There are 2 aspects that you're looking at. So if you look at the information propagation is from both the direction in the case of central scheme, only either from the backward direction or from the forward direction in the case of backward scheme or a central forward scheme. So what are the advantages and disadvantages that you get? Clearly, we know that from the Taylor series, we have seen that the central difference gives you a better order of accuracy. So when you're solving an equation, so before telling about order of accuracy, this part that is left out in the process of approximating the derivative is called truncation error. Because we are chopping off the terms at that point, and then we are trying to use the points which are left left out over here. So in representing the derivative, we are actually adding what is called a truncation error to the system. So we are trying to do something. The byproduct is you are getting something else. So we would like to understand what is the nature of this byproduct. Okay. So when you actually see this, this truncation error would actually affect my order of accuracy. It will tell me order of accuracy of the numerical scheme. So here you see that my error of backward difference scheme is proportional to delta x. So this is the order of 1, the power of delta x. The power of delta x is 1 here. So my scheme order is 1. For central difference, my the power of delta x is 2. So my order of accuracy is 2. So we would like to have a scheme with the highest order of accuracy. So we are not worried about what it is, how you get this order of accuracy, but we want this order of accuracy for a given numerical scheme to be as high as possible. So this is basically the idea of finite difference method. All that we are doing is approximate derivatives with the known quantities using Taylor series, and then figure out what order of accuracy you are getting. And based on the method, you have different options to choose. And once you get to choose the options, you get the final numerical scheme to work on and solve this equation at every point in the grid. And you see that the solution evolving in time. Okay. So now look at if you look at this is we are explicitly writing the new value at q plus 1 in terms of old values at various grid points. So such schemes are called explicit schemes. So these are the kind of okay, this is explicit scheme. Let me introduce to implicit scheme. Now if you look at this, if you look at the stencil, let me draw the stencil again here. So I have my grid points at I minus 1, I and I plus 1 here at the level q. I have I have grid point here at I plus 1 and I minus 1. So instead of taking my spatial derivatives at q, I'll take my spatial derivatives at q plus 1. That means dou u by dou x is approximated as u I plus 1 q plus 1 minus u I minus 1 q plus 1 by 2 delta x. All that I changed is instead of taking derivatives at this level, I'm taking the derivatives at this level. That's it. Nothing else. No change has been incorporated. So if you go back and substitute this in your equation and see what happens, you have up. No, sorry. So you have ui at q plus 1 minus ui at q by delta t plus a times ui plus 1 at q plus 1 minus ui minus 1 at q plus 1 by 2 delta x equal to 0. So again, we do the same exercise of collecting the all unknown values to one side and the known values to one side. Here the unknown values are at the level q plus 1 and the known values are at level q. So you bring all those unknown values to one side and the known values to the side. So you have a by 2 delta x into minus a by 2 delta x ui minus 1 at q plus 1 plus ui q plus 1 plus a delta t by 2 delta x ui plus 1 q plus 1 is equal to uiq. So you are writing you are writing all the values into a, now this part can be rewritten in a matrix form. So if I replace this entire thing by what is called lambda, a by 2 delta x as lambda. So I have minus lambda 1 lambda, all other zeros. So you get a tridiagonal system. And you will see ui minus 1, ui plus 1 which is equal to the U matrix ui minus 1, sorry, the ui plus 1 and all those things on the right hand side. So to solve this, you invert this matrix. In one shot, you get all the values updated in given time. So, such method is called what is called implicit method. So you have you can either use an explicit method or you can use an implicit method. So the difference between these two things is, in implicit method, you need to construct this matrix. So most of the time, most of the coding process would go in constructing the matrix, and once you construct the matrix, you try to invert the matrix. So in CFD, the general rule that in general they use is never invert a matrix. The reason behind not inverting a matrix is simple. Matrix inversion is the most costliest operation that is performed on a computer. Nothing else. So on when you use a computer, you use it for two different things. One thing is speed, accuracy, and the rate at which when you say speed, the number of operations that you do should be as much should be done as fast as possible and at a very low cost. When I say cost here, it is the time of CPU time that you are taking in calculating that particular operation. So it's a very well-known fact that inversion of a matrix is the costliest operation that you should be able that is being done on a computer or even manually when you are doing it. So avoid as much as possible to invert matrices. So the least costed operation is basically the forward and backward substitutions, solving a diagonal systems or lower diagonal, upper diagonal systems. So what they do is, if you have inevitably have to do this thing, then A is approximated as LU approximation or LDU approximation. Use this approximation and solve it in 3 different steps. So they generally don't invert the matrices. They solve either using lower upper factorization. They use some sort of factorization in solving the system. So when you use such system, then you say that a kind of implicit method is called implicit method. There is other way around saying that one part of here you are looking at the entire system as an implicit system. You can do only time implicit, time derivatives to be implicit in nature, or only the spatial derivatives to be implicit in nature, or the combination of these two things. So there are a whole host of combination of methodologies that are available to actually solve these kind of systems. So we call so this is basically what is called finite difference method. So this is how we solve any equation. Now, instead of wave equation, you can take any other equation that is of your interest. You take any other equation of interest use this methodologies like this and then solve for this. Now I have given only for first order gradient. So what about second gradient? How do I calculate dou square f by dou x square? It's a simple fact again. Here you take the basic idea is you want dou square f by dou x square. You take these two terms and you add up these two equations. When you add up these two equations, the resulting expression that you get is basically your second order derivative. So let me do it for you and see what you get. So when you add up those two equations, you have f of x plus delta x minus f of x minus delta x is equal to 2 f of x plus 2 delta x square by 2 factorial into dou square f by dou x square plus all higher order terms. All higher order terms are there here. So now what is dou square f by dou x square? You have dou square f by dou x square equal to f of x plus delta x minus 2 f of x minus f of x minus delta x. Sorry, you're adding up those two equations. So this will become plus, you'll have plus by delta x square. So this is your second derivative. So if you happen to look at second derivatives, you can approximate like this. So similarly, you can approximate any order of derivative to whatever order of accuracy that you want. So suppose if you look at the previous page, first derivative, if you have to operate at second order accuracy, you need this point, and this point. You need 3 points. So if you tabulate that, first derivative order of accuracy, order of n, n is equal to 1 for order of accuracy, number of points. If you look at this, the first derivative, if you look at first order of accuracy, you need 2 points. First derivative, if you are looking at second order of accuracy, you need 3 points. That means to say that if I want to have first derivative third order of accuracy, you need 4 points. And if you say that first derivative nth order accuracy, I want order of accuracy or p order of accuracy, I need p plus 1 points. So what's happening is the length of the stencil, the length of the number of points that are included is keeping on increasing as the order of accuracy increases. So what's the problem with this? So initially we don't see any problem. So unless we have all number of points, the data availability at all number of points, there's no problem in this. So you can actually get all order of accuracies. But the major problem that you get is, say suppose my domain is restricted. So this is my domain. So 0 and 1, and I have say the following points. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 points. So 0 to 7, 8 points are there. So if I'm approximating my derivative at 4.4, I don't have any problem, because if you take second order accuracy, you need 3 points. So you get these 3 points here. So for fifth point, you get these 3 points. Sixth point, you get 3, 7. But if you calculate if you are looking at the derivative at 6.6, you need 3 points. So 6 is not a problem. If you are calculating derivative at 7, you need 6, 7, and 8. You need a point over here. You need a point over here, which is not available. So that is one. So the boundary points, the gradient evaluation at the boundary points becomes a problem as your order of accuracy increases. So and similarly, if you are looking at gradients at point 0, you don't have this gradient. You don't have this point. So this is only for second order gradient. If you go for third order accuracy, you need 2 more points at the boundaries. So 4 more points. The number of points that are required will keep increasing as you reach the boundaries. So that's a major problem that you find in finite difference method. So how do you tackle this? So you can say that either I can once I reach the boundary, I take only the information from the interior of the domain. That's one way of looking at it. But how does that affect the solution? We are not sure as such. So here also, I kind of take only interior points. Or the other way around, I can say that I can reduce my order of accuracy at the boundary. Instead of second order, I'll take only first order of accuracy. If I take first order of accuracy, I have a required number of points at the boundary, so I can actually take them. But that also becomes a problem because the entire the numerical scheme, you see that the information is propagating from one grid point to other grid point. If you suddenly reduce the order of accuracy at one of the grid points, whatever the error that particular derivative creates at that particular point also propagates into the domain. So as the fluid, if you assume that it is a channel in which the fluid is flowing, and you are approximating the numerical values using derivatives and all, and when you are actually approximating you are creating errors. The errors also will propagate into the flow field, and this propagation of error may contaminate the flow field at all completely. So there is a huge potential problem that reducing the order of accuracy to calculate the derivatives at the boundaries may affect your solution completely, and sometimes the solution may completely go wrong. Since the equation that you have seen is a linear equation, this may not affect for wave equation, but the actual Navier-Stokes equations are nonlinear hyperbolic equations or parabolic equations. So once nonlinearity comes into picture, we don't know what happens. How the behavior of the nonlinear terms may aggravate the error, and it may totally collapse your system as it is. So there's a potential danger in reducing order of accuracy. So you have to maintain the same order of accuracy at every grid point, including the boundaries. Okay, so that's one thing that you need to keep in mind when you're using a finite difference method. So one more, this is one major drawback of finite difference method. The one more major drawback of finite difference method is if your geometry is complex. If the geometry is complex, then you can't apply finite difference methods because say suppose my domain is something like this. Here the geometry is not that complex except for this line. So when you're looking at grid, when you say that my grid is something like this, so at this point you have the variation both in x and as well as in y. So you need what are called mixed derivatives here. So if this is the simplest geometry. Here you can't apply directly the finite difference methods because my delta x here from, if you look at this two grid points, dx and dy both are changing. They are not on the same line, so you can't apply the same numerical scheme that I applied to this grid. So on a simple Cartesian grids, you have a Cartesian grid. This is called Cartesian grid. On Cartesian grids and simple geometries, you can actually apply finite difference method. So if you have more complex geometries, it's not advisable to use finite difference method because it becomes very complicated. So the other methods that you use is the finite volume method and other things. So, how much time I have still? 15 minutes, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You can go ahead, sir. No problem.
Yeah, I can go ahead, but people get bored. So this is the basic idea of finite difference method. I'll just move on to finite volume method and explain you the basic idea of what is this finite volume method. So you have finite volume method. In finite volume method, we don't deal with points. We see one more thing that you need to understand is finite difference method. We use partial differential equations as it is in the differential form. We take the equation, we take a geometry, we discretize the geometry at number of points on a Cartesian mesh. Once you have a Cartesian mesh and governing differential equation, you can directly on a Cartesian mesh you can directly apply a finite difference method to whatever accuracy you want. In the case of finite volume method, you don't deal with points, but you discretize the space into control volumes. So you are now interested in this volume completely. So this is a volume that you are looking at. So I'll have to look at say A, B, C, D. This is my control volume. So in this control volume, each control volume will have a centroid. Okay. In finite volume method, there are two ways of looking at it. You have cell-centered finite volume method and cell vertex based finite volume method. I think the next session by Professor Dharmarao primarily, I guess that he primarily deals with cell vertex finite volume method. So the basic idea is,
Sir.
Yeah.
No, sir. Continue.
Okay. So the basic idea is, if I take my wave equation, so dou u by dou t plus a dou u by dou x equal to 0. This is my equation, and I'm looking at u of x comma t as a solution. So my data point is u. So where is my data point stored is the question that you need to ask. In the finite difference method, the data is stored at the grid point. Okay. So in the case of finite volume method, how many grid points are there? You have cell vertices A, B, C, D, and you also have a cell centroid O. So where is this U stored? Where is this U value kept? If the U values are kept at the cell centroids, then it is called cell-centered finite volume method. That means you're storing the U values at these points. You are storing values at these points. And the question this is called the basic idea. The storage is at the cell centroids, so it is called cell-centered finite volume method. If the storage happens at the cell vertices, then it is called cell vertex finite volume method. Okay. Now there is a problem here. So what you do is you have to do the space-time integration for this. So the governing equation in the finite volume method for this case, the same equation, the wave equation is written like this: d by dt of integral u dv, dv plus integral ua nds equal to 0. These two are identical equations. They're two different equations. I just wrote the same equation in integral form. You apply Gauss divergence theorem, use chain rule, take u inside that derivative. Like that derivative, the spatial derivative is like dou of au by dou x. So that's like a divergence. You apply Gauss divergence theorem, you get the spatial convert that volume integral to surface integral. You get the second one. And this integral you take, you integrate in space, the entire integral space, and take the time derivative outside the integral, and you get this. So this is the basic integral form of the wave equation that you use. Now here, these u's are at cell centers. So the basic problem in finite volume method is this: you have data here. So the time derivative is evaluated at the cell center. The time derivatives are evaluated at the cell centers. This integral is evaluated on the surface. Here, 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 and here. On these four surfaces. Now the problem is, this u is known. This is given. This is at the cell center. It is given. Is on the surface. You have these four surfaces. The value at the surface is not there. So how do you get this integral when the value is not available? That's a major question of research in finite volume method. Even now, people are using devising different techniques to evaluate the surface integral at finite volume method. So you see the complexity that has increased from finite difference method to finite volume method. Now the intuition says that I know the value at this point. I need the value on this at this interface to evaluate this integral. So this u here is on the interface, and this is unknown, and you need to get this first and then apply this. So if you have to rewrite this, now, I'll make one more small approximation. So this integral u dv, I can rewrite this as volume times u average. This is basically weighted average integral. So you know that average of any quantity is 1 by volume u dv. This is the basic idea that you're looking. This integral is known. This is basically average of a given quantity in a general field, or basically a volume weighted average basically. So replace this integral by this quantity here. If you replace that quantity, you have d by dt of u bar plus integral un a times un ds equal to 0. Now this can be written as u bar I q plus 1 minus u bar I q by delta t, as I did it in finite difference method, plus this surface integral. I can write this integral can be approximated to a summation. Integral is nothing but summation. So I is equal to 1 to number of phases in the control volume. How many number of phases in the control volume that you want? In 1D you'll have 2. In 2D, based on the geometry, that if you are using triangles, you have 3 phases. If you are using quadrilaterals, you have 4 phases. If you are doing hexagons, you have 6 phases. So based on the type of grid you use, the number of phases for the control volume keeps on changing. So AU times N times delta S equal to 0. So I'm approximating this integral by this expression. I'm approximating this derivative by this expression. So I need to evaluate U on the interface. So U on the interface, the first approximation that I can consider is I can take average of U bar. So if I consider this, if I take this region, I'm enlarging that. I have a point called I here. I have a point called I plus 1 here, and U bar at I is stored here. U bar at I plus 1 is stored here. I want information at I plus half. U bar I plus half. So how do I get this? So I know value here, I know value here. I want value in this region. So the simplest of all the things that you can consider is take the average of these two things. Just you take the average of. So u bar at I plus half, u bar at I plus half is equal to average of u bar at I and u bar at I plus 1. Okay. So this is the simplest that I can take. So replace this u by u bar I plus half at all the phases. So when you in say suppose this is happening in one dimension. Let me draw the grid. So I'd have I plus 1, I have I minus 1. So my control volume, this is at I plus half, and this is at I minus half, and this is my control volume. So if I assume that my grids are uniformly distant, that means this distance is delta x, and this distance is also delta x. So this becomes delta x, and I have u bar here sitting here, u bar sitting here, and u bar sitting here, and I have u bar at I plus half. The first image I'm taking it as u bar I plus u bar I plus 1, and I have u bar I minus half as half of u bar I plus u bar I minus 1. This is the simplest that I can do. Okay. So in cell-centered method, this is the way that you do. In cell vertex method, what happens is your information is stored at A, B, C, D. You have that integral. So you do an integration, numerical integration between these 2 points. You perform a numerical difference integration between C and D to get the value of U on this line. Use that U in calculating this surface. However, in cell vertex method also, you have the same thing. Time derivative is evaluated at cell centers, but you don't know the value of the cell center. So what you can do is, my U bar is average of all the 4 points. So U bar you can consider saying that the data is coming from all these 4 points. So here it's coming from here, it's coming from here, all these 4 points. And on this surface, you're taking these 2 points as consideration and do the numerical integration at that point. Use this as time evolution and use this as spatial integration. So this complexity keeps on increasing. And if you do this, and if you perform this, this becomes the first order of accurate scheme. You'll get a second order accurate scheme, central difference scheme. This is equivalent to when you substitute this in the previous expression and simplify it, you will end up with what is called the same equation similar to your central difference on a finite difference in finite difference method. They are identically the same. For at least the wave equation, it becomes identically the same. So this is how the finite volume method is developed. And if you want higher order of accuracies, all that you need to understand is I can reconstruct U bar at I plus half as a function of AUI plus BU I plus 1 plus CU bar I plus 2, or I can take BU I plus 1 I minus 1, or I can take I minus 1 I minus 2 plus BU bar I minus 1 plus CUI. Okay, so all that I'm doing is I'm considering one more I minus 2 and say I plus 2. and I have U bar here. So to calculate the value here, I am considering this value, this value, this value, one stencil. I can read it as this as one stencil. I can use this as one stencil, or I can use this. Sorry, this as one stencil. So to get higher order accurate schemes, I'm involving all the points. So to get higher order accurate schemes, I reconstruct the values by using these stencils and get the values at UI plus half. Similarly, I'll do the same process by using get a value at I minus half. So you can increase the number of stencils. So now all that you're doing is you're increasing the number of grid points in getting the data. So the same problem that you have seen in the case of finite difference method can evolve here also when you approach the boundaries. So what you do is you create at the boundaries. What you create is you either create virtual ghost cells, virtual control volumes. We call them the ghost cells because they are not real. They are not actually the physical cells that you are looking at, where the information is propagating inside the domain. They are virtual, and you try to pump in some information into that. And then from there, you can actually get some information while calculating the values at U. But if you feed wrong values in those virtual cells, then all the information, the wrong values that you feed in will pump into the what is called the domain. So you have to be very much careful in what value you are choosing at the boundaries. Okay. So this is basically the finite volume method. So the basic difference between finite volume and finite difference method is this: you solve the partial differential equation directly on the grid, but the problem that the grid under consideration is very simple. You can't have complex geometries. Finite difference method can't handle complex geometries, and so you shift to finite difference method, so finite volume method. Finite volume method now can take any sort of geometry, irrespective of the geometry under consideration. You can use this method, but the thing is you have to do some approximation, something like this. So each method that you use has some approximation inbuilt in it. So there's no other way. You can't avoid that approximation. So when you are approximating a particular thing, you have to be aware that you are approximating it properly. So the amount of approximation that you are going and the way in which the approximation is happening, that particular part should be very much clear to you. Okay. If you don't have that idea, then you don't know what's happening inside that. So then whatever the numbers that code is generating is absolute waste. It doesn't make any sense. So you should be very careful in choosing what finite difference method, what method that you are using, and what kind of methodology that you are using for solving the scheme. So overall, if you see that, all that you are doing is I have 2 points. I have point A, point B, or we say point A, point B, point C. All I'm trying to get is some data in between these 2 points. That means I'm using interpolation. On how well you interpolate the data, you can get it through physics, you can get it through numerics, you can get it from all the way, combination of physics and numerics, and you approximate the data here. So we are just doing approximations in all these methods. To simply say, we are just doing approximations. So what kind of approximations are you doing? How well your approximations are doing is a different question that we need to ask. Once you do this approximation, we need to do what is called the stability analysis of the numerical scheme. So without doing the stability analysis, if you blindly say that I'm taking a higher order accurate scheme and I have this following interpolation method which I wanted, I'm substituting it, and you see that the code may not work. Why it is not working, we don't know. We end up with stability analysis. So there's one particular term that you see that you have seen. We have A delta T by delta X. If you look at this term, A is the speed with which the wave is traveling, and delta t by delta x is delta x is a spatial term, delta t is a time term. So delta x by delta t, you have space by time. It's like velocity there. So this is like a by a physics by a numerics. So you have ratio of two speeds there. One, the speed with which the physics is traveling inside the domain, the actual speed with which the physics, the basic information is traveling. Second one is the speed with which the information is traveling on the grid. It is depending on delta x and delta t. So this ratio should always be less than or equal to 1. If this ratio is always less, if you can maintain that this ratio is always less than or equal to 1, that means the information, the numerical information should not actually cross the physical information that is propagating on the grid. If you can maintain this, then to some extent you can maintain you say that the stability of the scheme is maintained. It's not a general rule. Again, there are certain places this may be maintained to half. There are some schemes it is less than half and less than that. There are some schemes, ideally we wanted this to keep at 1. A physics by A numerics equal to 1. That's ideal numerical scheme that we would like to have. But in most of the cases, we'll see that this is less than or equal to 1, and for most of the popular numerical schemes, it is less than half. So we see that there are certain issues that pop out. I can't discuss every issue here. You can actually look into standard textbooks and they'll actually explain you very clearly what are those issues and why those issues are coming here. Okay, so this is one issue that you can actually consider. The second thing is the boundaries. So you consider you have a domain here. This is my boundary point and this is my boundary point. So I know that u of x comma t is a solution that is being propagated in the domain. So if I prescribe the function itself, there are two kinds of boundary conditions basically. Dirichlet boundary conditions and Naumann conditions. Naumann conditions. Dirichlet condition saying that if you prescribe the function itself, at the boundary, if you know that these are the limits that I should have. So when you're solving a particular problem, you should have that minimum idea of what should be the value of the function at the boundary, or what should be the kind of flow field that you have. Okay, so if you can prescribe the function at the boundary itself, then they are called Dirichlet boundary conditions. The other way around, you can say that I don't know the function, but I know how the gradient of the derivative of the function or the gradient of the function behaves. So you can prescribe the gradient here. Gradient of the function. Then they come into the category of what is called Naumann conditions. The other way around, we have what are called characteristics. Maybe the spelling may be wrong. Sorry for that. Characteristics based boundary conditions. So in NS solver, we see that we have certain characteristics coming inside the domain, and you have certain characteristics going outside the domain. So if the characteristics are coming inside the domain, prescribe the value of the function. If the characteristics are coming inside the domain, then you have to give them the values. The code expects that the numerics expects that these values should be particularly given in the as a boundary condition. If the characteristic is going outside the domain, you use actually the code uses extrapolation or interpolation. Interpolate or extrapolate from the values inside the domain. So say suppose in fluid flows, all subsonic flows will have at least two characteristics coming inside the domain and one characteristic going outside the domain. So when two characteristics, you need to prescribe two variables. So generally pressure and temperature would be prescribed, or pressure and density would be prescribed. Okay. And velocities would be approximated, extrapolated basically. And similarly at the exit also. So you should look at what kind of characteristics are there and what kind of boundary conditions I need to. That depends on problem to problem. So if the flow is supersonic at the inlet and supersonic at the outlet, all the characteristics at the inlet, all the characteristics are coming inside. So you need to prescribe all the values, all the flow conditions. At the exit, since it is supersonic, all the values are extrapolated. You don't need to prescribe anything there. So if you have a supersonic inlet and subsonic exit, you have to prescribe all the values here. And at exit, two characters are going out and one is coming in one dimension. So what you get is you have to prescribe one variable there. Generally, you prescribe pressure there. Pressure is the boundary condition that you generally prescribe. So most of the, say suppose the slow speed flows are subsonic in nature. So one boundary condition that you need to always prescribe is the pressure. You need to understand what kind of pressures they have at those boundaries, and you need to give the value of the pressure. The second one is either you give the density or you give the velocity. So based on whatever the quantity that you present there, the rest of the quantities will be calculated by the code inside based on what you are giving them. So this is the simple glimpse of what the boundary condition is. You need to have minimum 2-3 hours discussion on boundary condition itself as it is. So, and whatever I have presented here also is some simple basics of what these methods are. Okay, fine. I'll stop it here.
Thank you very much, sir.
If there are any questions from any persons, then I'll be happy to take.
Yes, sir. There is one question.
Yeah.
Sir, he's asking to give some names of good books for numerical methods.
Okay. There are so many books. There are so many books. You can use Chung, Computational Fluid Dynamics by Chung. You can use Computational Fluid Dynamics by Hirsch, Volume 1, Volume 2. There are 2 volumes of that. If you are interested primarily in gas dynamics, compressible flows and all those things, Colbert Laney, Computational Gas Dynamics by Colbert Laney is a very good book. Then you have numerical methods by Toro, then Patankar, Malal Shekhara. Then there's a recent book by Professor M. Ramakrishna of IIT Madras, which is free copy available on his website. You can download directly. That book is also very. Yeah, there are various books giving various topics on CFD. One book, we can't say that. If you want a particular book that gives a glimpse of CFD that you want is you can follow Chung. Chung gives the differences between finite difference, finite element, and finite volume methods. As such, for incompressible flows, you can follow Malal Shekhara. Chung is okay, Hirsch is okay, but they don't say that it is particularly for incompressible flows. They just give you numerical methods. So you should be able to sit and figure out which book is used, what method is used, and how it is being used. It takes some time. So minimum to 6 to 7 months it takes for you to understand these methods. If you systematically sit daily and look at these methods, try these methods, hands-on exercise, do the hands-on exercises, then it takes 6 to 7 months easily to understand a numerical method and apply it to a problem of whatever of your interest. So these are a few books, and there are a whole host of books that are available online.
Thank you, sir.
You go to MIT websites, you go to Stanford websites, you have so many books there. And online lectures are also there. If you want if you are interested in writing your own codes to understand what's happening in that, why the code behaves like that, and all those things, you have this NPTEL lecture by Professor M. Ramakrishna from IIT Madras. There's one professor from Kharagpur. What is his name? Shit.
Chakravarti, sir.
Suman Chakravarti. There's Suman Chakravarti's videos from IIT Kharagpur. Then Tapan Sen Gupta's from IIT Kanpur. Tapan Sen Gupta's lecture will be on advanced finite difference methods and all those things. Ramakrishna's methods would be like on finite volume methods and all. And Suman Chakravarti's would be on incompressible flows. So see, every person in CFD has a domain that he works on. So when CFD doesn't mean that he covers everything. So my primary focus was on compressible flows, and that too high speed compressible flows and supersonic flows and like that. So my methods that I know and I am expertise on all those things are very restricted to those fields. If you ask me if I had to solve incompressible flows, I may not be able to give a proper justification for that, because I haven't worked on incompressible flows. It takes years of time to work for each kind of flows that you're looking at. But I know what they do, but I haven't written a codes for incompressible flows. But definitely I've written codes for compressible flows. So I know the difficulties that crop out of when you're dealing with problems.
Sir, next question is,
yeah.
Sir, is there any difference between finite difference method and Keller box method? Can you explain Keller box method?
Keller box method. I'm not sure what this Keller box method is.
Okay, sir. Sir, another question. Can you explain characteristic boundary conditions with example?
Characteristic boundary conditions with examples. Okay. See, characteristics. That's what I said. I'll give you the data or information, you can go and check in Chung. So characteristics are those curves where the data remains constant. Okay, whatever the data that you are looking at is remain constant along that curve. So if you actually write the governing equations, the Navier-Stokes governing equations in non-conservative form, you'll get a flux Jacobian. So for 1D flow, if you can find the eigenvalues of the flux Jacobian, you'll get 3 eigenvalues because you have 3 equations in 1D. So those eigenvalues are u plus a, u, and u minus a, where u is the speed of sound, a is the speed of, u is the fluid speed, a is the speed of sound, and you have u plus a and u. If you look at u plus a and u, both are positive. So if you take the inlet boundary, these two quantities point inside the boundary. But u minus a is negative because u is always less than a for subsonic flows. So it points outside. So the characteristic says that 2 values are coming into the domain and 1 value is going outside the domain. That means for those 2 values which are coming into the domain, you should prescribe the values, 2 physical values. So you can choose what are the physical values. What are the physical values that you have? You have pressure, density, temperature, velocity. Okay. Out of these 4, 2 you have to prescribe there. The rest 2 it will calculate from the inside the domain. So based on the eigenvalues of the flux Jacobian matrix, you actually define what are the values that you need to prescribe that. Okay. So in 1 dimension you have 3 eigenvalues. 2 dimensions you have 4 eigenvalues. 3 dimension you have I think 5. You have u U plus A, U, and U minus A. So 5 values will be there. So U plus A is positive, U positive, and U minus A is negative. So 4 values are coming inside the domain and 1 is going out the domain. So you need to give 4 values at the inlet and at what are the domain you are looking at. So this is how the characteristic boundary conditions are defined. You actually create, evaluate the characteristics there at that point.
Yes, sir. Another question, sir.
Yeah.
How to certify my own developed code with my any possible inventions for an applied engineering problem? It is
Okay. So for any code that you develop, you have standard benchmark problems. They are available in all the textbooks, and there are certain cases. There are websites where you take any software website that they have standard problems. So if your code, when you run the same standard test problems on your code and you get identical results, you validate them. So once you validate with all the benchmark problems, you get the confidence that your code is correct. Then you apply to any problem which is of your interest. If your boundary conditions are correct, then also I don't say that the problem is the solution that you get is correct there. If your boundary conditions are correct, possibly, and in that scenario, if you have a standard test case, that means you give some input and you expect that this input is you expect an output from that input, and you are getting that, your code is correct. So you have to benchmark your codes basically with standard problems, and then it depends on what kind of problem that you work based on the boundary conditions how you give. So there's no standard procedures, but this one is you validate with all the benchmark problems that you do. So validation is a key.
another one, sir. How to discrete second order term derivative using FDM?
I given that, right? You write the Taylor series till the second order. You bring the second order derivative to the left hand side and keep all other derivatives to the and chop off the higher order terms. Whatever the remaining term that you get is your second the expression for the second. That this we have shown in the way in that document. I have actually written that actually.
Yes.
Hello, sir. Sir, good morning, sir.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. Good morning, sir.
Tell me.
Sir, I have one doubt, sir.
Yeah.
I want to analyze the heat transfer and fluid flow characteristics, which is force inside the circular pipe. Now, the pipe is having the 4 layers, outer layers, concentric cylinder.
Okay.
Now, I can do the analysis 4 ways. First is, I will take the 4 layers of solid cylinder, and the fluid is flowing inside. I will do the analysis. Second thing is, I will not take the solid part. I will take only the fluid part, and I will apply the boundary condition, thermal boundary conditions outside the fluid layer.
Okay.
Among those, which is the appropriate method to get the results which is closer to the practical condition. Why? Because no, sir. What I observe is some people are doing. They take the 4 layers of solid body and with fluid domain, they do the calculation. They do the results and all. Some people are doing without solid domain. They are taking the only fluid domain. They carry the analysis part.
No, it's
Which is the best way to proceed further and further?
okay. See, there's nothing like there's a best way or this is the worst way. If your interest is in the 4 layers of the solid, and if you know the fluid conditions a priori to solving that problem, if you know the listen to this carefully. If you know the fluid conditions at the pipe flow very clearly, then there's no point solving that. Waste of time. You are just generating heat inside the computer. And if your interest is in the 4 how the conduction or whatever the heat transfer is happening in the 4 layers, And if you know the fluid conditions, there's no point solving in fluid flow solver there. It's waste of time. If the flow conditions are not known, say suppose if the flow is turbulent there, or something is happening where you don't know the exact conditions of the fluid flow, then it's better that you solve the fluid flow along with this heat transfer problem inside the in these four walls. So it's not that always you have to solve the fluid flow problem and the heat transfer problem simultaneously. In fact, this is the case for all the problems. Everybody thinks that I have to create entire domain and solve everything. No, that's not the case. If your interest is, check out your interest there. If your interest there in this problem for your case is a heat transfer alone, and the properties of the fluid and the fluid flow is known, you don't need to solve the fluid flow problem. That's what that's how I am thinking there. If you know it and if you are solving it, then it's a waste of time and resources both.
Thank you, sir.
Then hope I answered him.
Yes. Sir, one last question, sir.
Sure.
Sir, can you please explain how to simulate multi-scale, multi-dimensional battery modeling? How it is different from simulation console?
See, guys, I want to be very clear. I know a little bit of CFD, and my domain is compressible fluid flows. So if you ask me questions on that, I can answer because I worked on that. Battery simulation and all I didn't do. I know to some extent I have done some simulations, like to understand the behavior of governing equations, the methodologies they apply, how the methodologies have to be created. These techniques I have learned for sure. That's not, I'm not denying the fact. But if you ask me how to model a battery, I can't do that. See, in battery modeling, there are many aspects. What is that you are interested in? Which domain? Is it the chemical reactions that is happening there? Is it the charging of electrons and discharging of electrons that's happening there? Or it is the fluid behavior of the fluid that is happening inside the battery as it is charging and discharging? I don't know what problem that you're looking at. So I can't say, I can't tell you, explicitly tell you what is battery modeling. Okay, coming to COMSOL. COMSOL is another commercial fluid flow software, multi-physics software that is available. And that is basically finite element based. Okay, so based on your problem, you have to check whether you want to do finite element method, finite volume method, or finite difference method. So I don't think there's any software that is available commercially which solves the finite difference method. Finite element method, COMSOL is there. Finite volume method, ANSYS Fluent is there. ANSYS CFM also works on finite volume method, but they are commercial softwares that you don't need to work. But if you are interested only fluid flows, finite volume method, there are number of whole host of free softwares. For multi-phase flows, you have Paris, you have BOSS from TU Darmstadt group, which gives you finite volume method, discontinuous Galerkin based method software. That is an open source software. You have OpenFOAM, which is a multi-physics platform which works on all the platforms. But here you can create your own equation, and then you can use that equation in the finite volume framework as it is in OpenFOAM. And OpenFOAM is one best tool that you can use if you are interested and if you want to try your own new evolutions. But it doesn't have GUI. You don't need mouse and all those things. You should be able to type, do the compiler things and all those things. So people thinking that software by a few button clicks you'll get an answer is nonsense. You don't get things like that. Not even in COMSOL, not even in ANSYS or any other Flowtherm or whatever the software that you're looking at. You have to be very careful of what domain you want to create, what area that is you're working, the domain that you are choosing, the discretization process that you're choosing, the kind of methodologies that it solves. So you should have the prior idea of it. Okay, commercial softwares are available to ease your work of not writing the code and getting your results. But you need to understand the basic governing equations, the discretization processes, the boundary conditions. They are all in your hands. Nobody is going to tell you that. Okay, so commercial softwares, you just validate the software, do some courses, and when it comes to your problem to solve, you please work out all these basic steps, figure out what conditions, what boundary conditions are there, and then apply to them and see whether they are getting you are getting a reasonable result or not.
Thank you, sir.
But there is no universal solution for these things.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So there is one more question.
Yeah.
Can problem solved in FDM thrust bearing performance be solved accurately using FVM?
It depends on the equations. See, finite volume basically, if you are looking at the thrust bearing part, if you are interested in the fluid pressure or the bearing force. If you are using the, if you want the bearing force and you are looking at only the fluid loading that is coming onto the bearing, then finite element method is the best way. You can take the higher order polynomials as your shape functions and then get it done. But if you are looking on the other side, from the bearing side to the fluid side, if you are interested in the pressure of the fluid that is available there, to some extent, finite volume gives you better results.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir. So by this we are closing the session 1 of the day 2. We thank Dr. Ramesh Kolluru Garu for giving his informative lecture, and we'll be meeting at 2 p.m. exactly. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm leaving.
Thank you, sir. And closing the session.